Dobrodošli na YouTube kanalu Foul Play.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Foul Play. And the title of our presentation today is What plus Why equals Who. And my name is Dr. Silkman. And welcome. It's really, really good to be back. And everyone at Foul Play hopes that everyone is doing okay, especially with this world pandemic with the coronavirus. We hope that you, your family, and your loved ones are all safe. And I want to apologize for last week, but everyone at Foul Play went on strike because we couldn't find any toilet paper anywhere. Right, guys? There was no toilet paper anywhere.
Yeah, it was a mess.
It was a mess.
We wanted to wipe ourselves up, but we couldn't.
Exactly. So, guys, we are back. And the good thing about today, guys, we're going to be doing a special presentation. We're going to be looking at, if you're following MAM 2, we'll be looking at both episodes number 4 and episodes number 5. So this will be a double treat for you guys, so everyone's up to date. And I'd just like to say, everyone at Foul Play wants to thank every one of our 929 subscribers. That's absolutely awesome, and we're really, really stoked. If you like what we do, guys, please subscribe to our channel. And if you like our presentations, please give us a thumbs up. Like I said, we're not perfect. We can make mistakes. And guys, give us your feedback. That's very, very important, and we try our very best to improve our videos on the Foul Play channel, YouTube channel. We've had over 267,000 views, and that's awesome. And we thank you guys. Also on Foul Play, we have a lot of presentations, a lot of different presentations done by some really hard-working, dedicated people. We have the PPPs, the Powder Puff presentations, headed by Sammy and the girls, and they do a fabulous job. We have also the TTTs. We have a vast number of Stephen Avery phone calls, and they're very, very important. It's important to have a listen, at least to some of them. They give a real background outline to what was transpiring between Stephen and his family. And in a lot of cases, it's very, very tragic. We've just started the case readings, and Jack, 61, is doing a fabulous job of reading elements of the cases. I believe he's on the pre-trial at the moment, and we're going to endeavor to read all those trial readings. They're very, very important to listen to. And also we have a website. Please come and have a look at that. A lot of people have worked really, really hard, especially Spooky 67. She's put in a lot of time and effort, also with Zoe and other researchers. And the website's an absolute ripper. It contains a lot of very useful information. And of course, guys, we have a Discord presence, and whereby you can come on the Discord channel, the Foul Play Discord channel, and we discuss a lot of variety of topics. And there's always someone around the world, because we really do come from all around the world. Someone is there, and you probably meet BB, Sammy, and the other ladies. They are always on chat, just about always on chat, and they're there to help you guys with your questions and things like that. Okay. First of all, before I introduce who our regular researchers, all of us would like to thank Linda Kay for reaching 1,000 subscribers. That is an awesome effort. And keep in tune that the upcoming Mammothon is coming, and that should be awesome. A lot of good information will be discussed on the Mammothon. All right, guys. Well, joining us today, our regular researchers on Foul Play are BB, Jack 61, Kelly, Obi-Wan, and Spooky 67. And on chat, we have Katnit, Sammy, and Zoe. So they'll be taking your questions. So if you've got a question, write it down and we'll try and answer it the best that we can. All right, and our guest researcher today is Columbo. Columbo, if I could just ask you very quickly, what excited you to get introduced to the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases? Columbo.
It would closely be the fact that every piece of evidence that they point to this case doesn't add up to the facts of what actually did happen. And I can watch
Yes.
that and I can see that. And it's an absolute disgrace that they can take away the rights and the entire life of two citizens of the United States, just as they did.
Yes. Thank you, Columbo. We all feel that, and that's why we're all very passionate. We're all here together as a team approach, to have a look at the injustices that were done to Stephen and Brendan. And unfortunately, the more cases that we hear about, we see the same type of injustices done to a lot of people, and not only in America, but around the world. Columbo, do you have any other comments?
This shows injustice to everybody around the world. If they can do it to them two people, they can do it to you, your mother, sister, brother, even your little cousin.
Correct. That is correct. It really does affect everyone worldwide. And really, the eyes of the world are definitely on these two cases. All right, Columbo, any other comments?
Not at the moment.
All right, thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, we'll make a start. So, guys, let's have a look at slide number 1. So, as you know, Kathleen Zellner is representing Stephen Avery, and her experts compiled what is known as a motion for new scientific testing. That particular document was very extensive. It was a 154-page document. And guys, if you ever get the chance, it's definitely worth reading. It represents an excellent summary of the case as it was known at that stage. And she submitted or filed this report on August the 26th, 2016. And of course, it's 2020 and we're still waiting, or Kathleen Zellner is, of course, still waiting. But hopefully, in good time, she can get her evidentiary hearing in front of a judge. But it was pretty obvious that Kathleen Zellner coming into Wisconsin to submit the post-conviction scientific testing filing caused a big storm. And as you can see, there were a lot of reporters there firing a lot of questions at Kathleen Zellner. And she said something very, very important. And it really would have sent the shivers down the spine of the state when Kathleen Zellner said, "We are going to get to the bottom of who killed Teresa." So quite clearly, she meant business. This was a serious filing for post-conviction scientific testing. And of course, if you see the MAM 2 episode, who happened to be in the audience? Kim Ducat, which is, of course, Stephen Avery's own cousin. And it's rather remarkable that she appeared there talking to Kathleen Zellner when she was a confidential informant. So it's rather bizarre that she was present. Okay, so guys, if you do get the time, it's definitely worth reading that motion. It really summarizes the case really well. Okay, guys, let's have a look at slide number 2. Now, of course, one of the most controversial aspects of this case are the finding of the bones, more specifically, the finding of cremains. Now, we know allegedly that human cremains, burnt, cut cremains, were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit. But that wasn't the only place that cremains were found. Cremains were also found in a quarry, and we'll discuss that in a minute. And more specifically, pelvic bones were found in the quarry. Now, what strikes you immediately is that these bones that were found are nowhere near the Avery salvage yard. So they were very, very interesting. And you can see here on a skeletal model exactly where those bones had come from if they were indeed human. They were pelvic bones. And if you want to read more about it, they came from evidence tag 8675. Now, the state's forensic anthropologist was Dr. Leslie Eisenberg, and she basically looked at all the bones that were present, that were found on the salvage yard and off the salvage yard. And she was questioned by Dean Strang, and I quote, this is very, very important. I quote, "You still suspect them of being human pelvic bones?" Her response was, "Suspected, possible human." And what's frustrating here is that Dr. Eisenberg was not definitive. She never called those bones human bones. She called them suspected, possible human. And this was very, very frustrating because if she actually said that they were human, then this was going to severely weaken the case for the state, because the state attests that the victim, Teresa Halbach in this case, she was burnt in Stephen Avery's burn pit. So how on earth can one explain why human cut, burnt pelvic bones will be found in a quarry? So Dr. Eisenberg would have been coached by Ken Kratz not to give a definitive answer. And if you remember, Dr. Eisenberg was also involved in another murder, the Christine Rudy case, in which she erroneously said that animal bones that were present in a burn pit were in actual fact human fetal bones. So she made a huge mistake. So maybe she was under the pressure of not giving a definitive answer in this case. However, what is frustrating is this. Dr. Eisenberg, when she gave a description of those pelvic bones, she agreed with Dean Strang that they appeared to be human. And what is very frustrating is that she didn't do any further testing of those bones to prove that they were human or animal. And all she had to do, now wait for it, guys, is place the bones, cut them, place the bones under a microscope and observe the structure, right? Now, every forensic anthropologist has got a microscope in the laboratory, but she apparently did not examine the bones closely to determine whether they were indeed human or animal. However, all the description that Dr. Eisenberg stated, those bones were indeed very much human, but she never gave a definitive answer, which was very, very frustrating. Okay, so guys, let's have a look at slide number 3. And if we have a look at slide number 3, she was questioned further about the pelvic bones that were found in the quarry. And guys, you can see the image here. These are cut, but they're cut with a blade or a sharp knife. They're cut, burnt pelvic bone fragments. And they've got item tag number 8675. Now, when these pelvic bone fragments were found, they did not find any burn barrel. There was no burn barrel nearby, and there wasn't any presence of ash on the ground. This is significant. It means that someone had dumped the contents either of a burn barrel or some type of a container in the quarry. So now, guys, we have 3 distinct sites where cut, burnt bones have been found. In the Stephen Avery burn pit, allegedly, in Yonder burn barrel number 2, and also in the quarry. So we have 3 separate locations for these burnt cut cremains. And Dr. Eisenberg was questioned about this. I quote, "We're going past each other and it's my fault. Of the burnt, I mean, you found some burnt bone from all 3 sites." Answer, that's correct. Question, and of the burnt bone that you found, the condition was roughly similar in all 3 sites. Answer, that is correct. So in other words, in all 3 separate geolocations, we had cut, burnt bones. And the bones were burnt to the same extent. That's very, very, very powerful evidence that remember, Dr. Eisenberg said, we have one victim here. There are no duplicate bones. So how was the state going to explain how we had these bones in 3 separate locations, including in the quarry? Well, the way the state handled it, they ignored it. They didn't want to talk about it. Ken Kratz said, I'm not going to spend any more than 20 seconds, and that's precisely what he's done. Now, if we turn to slide number 4, this is very, very interesting because what Dr. Eisenberg was able to do is determine that there were actually 3 quarry piles, 1, 2, and 3. And in the photographs that have just been released, lo and behold, we find in the quarry, well, at least one picture shows a debris pile. And you can see it here. And it just so happens that there are 3 labeled 1, 2, and 3 with a tag. And so if we have a look at the debris pile number 2, we can see that someone has actually tipped over either a burn barrel or some type of container and dumped them within the quarry. And what they've done is with the debris pile, they've dug it up and they've placed it in buckets. And what they would have done with those buckets is they would have then sifted for contents like bones. And as you can see, in the debris piles, there were definitely human bones that were found. And you can see that the pelvic bones came from debris pile number 1. So someone dumped at least 3 piles within the quarry. So that was very, very interesting. So it was very controversial because the state forensic anthropologist, Dr. Eisenberg, refused to call them human. Yet, if you look at the description of the bone fragments, Dr. Eisenberg did indeed find human bones at the quarry, which is very, very interesting. Okay, so Kathleen Zellner asked a very important question, and that is, how could the bones be placed back on the Avery salvage yard? Let's have a look at slide number 5. So what we see here is that the Avery salvage yard itself, there were squad cars in all corners of the salvage yard, right? So that was to prevent people coming in, people coming out, people that were coming in, that were recorded on a sheet, so you could control who came in and who came out. However, what Kathleen Zellner noted was that if we have a look at slide number 6, what Kathleen Zellner noted was that the field, I believe it was a cornfield, between Cuss Road and Stephen Avery's trailer, in actual fact was unguarded. There was no one looking over that particular stretch of field. So this potentially meant that a planter could bring material from Cuss Road or the deer camp and onto Stephen Avery's burn pit via the field, because there was no one that was guarding that particular field. So there definitely was a way or a mechanism whereby evidence could be planted at the Avery salvage yard quite easily. And no one will know that you're doing this, especially at night time. So guys, let's have a look at slide number 7. This is very important because back in 2005, you can see that there was a track that went directly from Cuss Road to Stephen Avery's trailer. And this was significant because one of the scent dogs, Loof, went along this track, and we'll be discussing it in a minute. This was known as track number 3. So a scent dog went between Stephen Avery's trailer and Cuss Road. So what on earth is a scent dog who scented with Teresa Hallbuck's scent doing going between Stephen Avery's trailer and Cuss Road? It made no sense at all. And if you have a look at the figure on the lower right-hand side, Stephen Avery made the comment that, hey, Josh Radandt used to drive his pickup truck across the field and stop by and talk to Stephen Avery. So therefore, any small vehicle or a pickup truck or whatever could have access between Cuss Road and Stephen Avery's trailer, or indeed the auto salvage yard itself. That's very interesting. So guys, let's have a look at slide number 8. And this is very, very interesting and important. So as you know, at the salvage yard, they had both cadaver dogs and also scent dogs. And what we're going to do here is have a look at Canine Loof and track number 3. And as you can see, Loof was scented with Teresa Hallbuck's scent. I believe it was from the sole of a shoe. And what the dog did, what Loof did, is the dog went between Stephen Avery's trailer and Cuss Road. That's very, very interesting. And I'll read out what the report actually stated. I quote, Canine Loof went west in a picked cornfield. Directly to the south was a gravel pit, and in between the two was an area of brush and trees. Canine Loof worked this area with indications, now note, of very strong scent. Canine Loof worked west, coming out to a cul-de-sac, that's Cuss Road, that was taped off with crime scene tape, and 2 deputies were not allowing access. Canine Loof crossed the tape on one occasion and then was told to not go any further. The deputies phoned Sheriff Pagel to see if I could continue, but were told to not allow anyone access at this time. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but this is highly suspicious. You bring in dog handlers with scent and cadaver dogs. They detect, in the case of Loof, Canine Loof, the dog detects a very strong scent at the crime scene area that's been taped off near Cuss Road, and Sheriff Pagel prevented the dog from going any further. That's rather bizarre, because surely the dog has picked up a strong scent, and you want to know where the dog is ultimately going to go. And of course, we know what was marked off. It was the suspect grave, right? Which, of course, the state said, nothing nefarious here, guys, nothing to see at all. Yet, Canine Loof, who is scented with Teresa Hallbuck's scent, went directly there. But note, the track was between Stephen Avery's trailer and Cuss Road. So what on earth would Teresa Hallbuck's scent and strong scent be doing along that track? Very, very interesting. And guys, if you want to know further about the dogs, the cadaver dogs, McGilla has done an excellent job, an excellent presentation about the scent dogs and cadaver dog tracks. Okay, guys, so let's have a look at slide number 9. Now, this is really a throwback to our previous podcast, and that's because Josh Radandt, who lives and he owns the quarry and he owns the deer camp, clearly there was a lot of activity around those dwellings, right? And that would have concerned him while all the law enforcement officers were there, the dogs. There was clearly a lot of commotion and interest around the deer camp, Cuss Road. And Josh Radandt made the statement that he allegedly saw a fire coming from a 55-gallon drum, which is pretty remarkable because if you have a look at the picture on the lower right-hand corner, that's where Josh Radandt was standing. Now, why is that significant? Because he made the statement on the 5th, right? That's the day that the RAV4 was found on the Avery salvage yard. And so with this statement, he has already linked, whether deliberately or accidentally, he's linked Stephen Avery to the crime, which is very, very interesting. And of course, Kathleen Zellner, representing Stephen Avery, said, okay, this is very, very suspicious. I'm going to talk to Josh Radandt, right? And remember, Josh Radandt was never called, as far as I'm aware, to appear in the trials to give testimonies, and statements. But Kathleen Zellner wanted to talk to Josh Radandt. So guys, let's have a look at slide 10. And that's important because remember, all this activity was occurring around Josh Radandt's property and quarry. So it was important to get to the bottom of this. So Josh Radandt agreed to talk with Kathleen Zellner. However, he didn't do it alone. He had his lawyer present at the meeting. And what was discovered was something very, very important. So Kathleen Zellner met Josh Radandt at the deer camp. And it was very riveting because both Kathleen Zellner, Josh Radandt, his lawyer, they went on a tour. They drove around the place and he actually drove where he allegedly saw the burn barrel, according to that statement. But one thing that was discovered with talking with Josh Radandt, the pelvic bones were discovered to not be on his property. They were actually on the Manitowoc County gravel pit. So it didn't belong to Josh Radandt, it belonged to the state. And remember, at least 3 quarry piles or debris piles were found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. These are the ones, these bones that were found here. The state did not want to talk about them. Okay, so it's important, guys, that these debris piles were not on Josh Radandt's quarry, but were actually on the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Now, the talk with Josh Radandt and his lawyer was very significant. So, guys, let's turn to slide number 11. Now, Josh Radandt's lawyer said something very important. Now, mind you, Josh Radandt spoke to his lawyer and asked his lawyer whether he could actually give a response. So he wanted to make sure that he was not going to get into any type of legal trouble. He asked his lawyer whether he could respond to Kathleen Zellner. Josh Radandt's lawyer stated the following, I quote, "He is guessing. He doesn't see any barrel. He doesn't see any pit. He is guessing from his knowledge of where their buildings were." Guys, that straight away contradicts his statement that he made on the 5th, right? Where he definitively said he saw a fire coming from a burn barrel at Stephen Avery's home or property. right? And Josh Radandt said, and I quote, "What kind of fire do you want me to tell you that I saw?" And he made that statement because the investigators wanted him to change his statement and embellish, remember, the great big whopping fire? And Josh Radandt clearly did not see a great big whopping fire in a burn barrel, right? He was only guessing, but the investigators took it as gospel, right? Because they're trying to build up a story that Stephen Avery burnt, and of course, Brendan Dassey had burnt Teresa Halbach in a fire pit, in his fire pit. But Josh Radandt said something very, very jaw-dropping. And he said to Kathleen Zellner, and I quote, "They told me exactly the way that their theory was of the way they thought the car came. Through the field, down Cuss Road, past the hunting cabins to the pit." And I'm thinking to myself, guys, where have I heard this before? And if we have a look at slide number 12, voila, here is where we have heard it before. Fassbender and Wiegert, when they were interrogating Stephen Avery on November the 9th, told Stephen Avery exactly where they thought the Toyota RAV4 had come. That is, it went through the field, down Cuss Road, past the deer camp, on Conveyor Road, and dumped where the RAV4 was found. Now, that's very, very interesting because the investigators were telling Stephen Avery on November the 9th where that Toyota RAV4 came from, where it started and where it ended up, right? Now, why is that significant? Because the investigators told Stephen Avery, but also Josh Radandt, an independent person, where they believe the Toyota RAV4 came from. But lo and behold, what do we have here? We have a look on the right-hand side here. When they questioned Brendan Dassey, Fassbender asked Brendan Dassey, "All right, how did you get the car to the pit?" Brendan Dassey, and note, Brendan Dassey said that he drove, both him and his uncle Stephen, drove the car past his mum's house, past his grandmother's house, Dolores, past Uncle Chucky's house, past the vehicle crusher, and they drove it down to the pit. It is the complete opposite of what Fassbender told Stephen Avery and what he told Josh Radandt. And if you notice, the scenario on the left-hand side is supported by the scent dogs, right? So if you notice on the right-hand side, there's a lack of dog tracks. The dogs, for example, Loof, doesn't go running in the same direction that Brendan Dassey said they drove the vehicle. Oh no, the scent dog actually goes across the cornfield to Cuss Road. So this is a major Brady violation because the investigators knew that Brendan Dassey had absolutely no idea in which direction the actual car came from, right? So this is a major Brady violation. And that is, a Brady violation is, and I quote, "the suppression by the prosecution of evidence favorable to an accused upon request violates due process where the evidence is material either to guilt or punishment." Guys, here's another example where Brendan Dassey was completely guessing of what happened that day. And this goes to show that Brendan Dassey had no idea how the Toyota RAV4 got to the pit. And what makes it worse, guys, is that Fassbender and Wiegert knew Brendan Dassey was completely guessing. And yet they went with it. All right, guys. Now look, that brings a close to episode number 4. Before I continue with episode number 5, guys, are there any questions you'd like to ask so we can complete this little section here? Guys, any questions? Are we all good? Jack
Sam?
I have a
61.
comment.
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
Mike. Neverly.
My comment is I just wanted to thank you for putting the little RAV props to
You like that one?
to visualize. Yes, actually I do, because not everybody is super familiar with the east west, the sides of the,
Correct.
like I just go by left and right. But this way I can see where exactly we're talking about. And the aerial view is also confusing, and Stephen's property is quite small in comparison to the
Yes.
Radandt quarry. So this is perfect. Thank you. That's all.
Oh, no, pleasure. I think when you see it visually, it's very, very striking, because what the investigators told Stephen and Joshua Radandt is in complete contrast to what Brendan said to Fassbender on March the 1st. Jack 61, do you have a comment?
No, it was just for Sammy. There's some questions I think she's going to read that have been
Yep.
put up
Okay.
so far.
Okay.
Well,
Sam.
Graham Moss says, my question, why was Bobby and Scott Tadich going bow hunting when it is gun shooting season?
That's a good question. I'm not from Wisconsin, so I don't know. Anybody got an answer to that one?
Nope. Maz says, I wonder how many bones got crushed when the big digger turned them up in the pit.
Yes.
Wait. 1
BB.
second. What was that about bow hunting? Sorry.
All right. Well, he was wondering why they were going bow hunting when at that point hunting season was gun shooting season.
No, gun shooting season here in Wisconsin is always, it starts the weekend before Thanksgiving, and when it ends the weekend after Thanksgiving, it was
that
bow
clears
hunting
that up.
season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, BB.
Super.
Mm-hmm.
Super. Thank you. It's always good to have someone who lives close to Wisconsin and knows the local laws.
Well, let me say on
yes,
Maz's
Sam.
question, I want to say maybe a whole lot of damage could have been done by that excavator. That big piece of heavy machinery going through that site was an absolute, travesty and egregious. It had to have destroyed what could have been important evidence.
Well, yes,
or
you're right.
lack of it.
Correct. And Sammy, here's the problem, and we've covered this within a podcast, in fact, several podcasts. I reckon that BB is the closest person to getting what actually happened correct. And that is the bones came in a box and left in a box.
I agree.
I don't believe any human cremains were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit, because you can clearly see that heavy machinery was used to dig out the burn pit. And also, furthermore, you know that there are no in situ photographs showing those bone fragments. Dr. Bennett received a box of bones. He wasn't present at the burn pit. And believe it or not, Dr. Eisenberg never set foot on the Avery salvage yard. She was basically given the bone of boxes, the box of bones, and said, right, tell me what they are.
Yeah, you know my opinion of that.
Well,
we have another
plus
question.
There was no picture of that one who was it, his parents were meat cutters, or they owned a meat cutting place. Who
Yes.
said, found the first bone that was kicked out of the fire area. They
Yes.
said, this is a bone. I know what a bone looks like.
Yes.
There's not even a picture of that.
Well, yeah, Rhonda Newman says how many deer bones were in all these piles, and I'm sure someone
Correct.
familiar with burning deer carcass would have known how to burn a human body, and I agree with that.
Yes, correct. And in last week's podcast, we talked about the possibility of burning body parts in a burn barrel. It is possible.
And Cher Ward wanted to know, she said, is it common practice to shower before hunting?
Yeah, well, some hunters actually do that. I
Yeah.
think that the hunters use a special type of soap. BB, is that correct? They use a special type
Yeah.
of soap
Yeah.
before they go
Some do,
hunting.
but most don't. But
Yes, but the
yeah.
whole timing and scenario of Bobby Dassey leaving the property is very, very suspicious, timing wise as well. Columbo, do you have a comment?
I do. It is arguable to the fact the reason they used the equipment to dig out the pit, dig up the bones, and every place that they found them is to disturb that area. So as you could not test the bones and the top portion of the, like say, the burning pit. If you took
Correct.
what the bones were laying on that dirt and you say that's where they were at, that
Yes.
dirt should be on them bones. So if they dig that all up, you no longer have that to test. So you couldn't argue the point that they
Correct.
were laying.
Correct. And you know that the state's in big trouble anyway, because they didn't allow the state's coroner to come on board. The state's coroner would have kicked everybody out, brought in her team, and they would have used brushes and also a grid to map the position of every bone in that burn pit. The reason why they kicked the coroner off, guys, is very, very simple. There were no bones. There were no human bones there. If there were any human bones at all, they were brought in, right? Because you can't burn a body in situ, and the skeletal remains decide to walk to the Manitowoc County gravel pit or into Yonder burn barrel number 2. The case got more weirder the more information was obtained. So these cremains were not present in one spot. Minimum, they were at 3 separate geolocations. And Ken Kratz was trying to do his best to suppress and obfuscate everything. But now Kathleen Zellner has got the evidence she needs to show the shenanigans that took place. Jack 61, do you have a comment?
Just an observation, and if I remember what I read correctly, and I had some discussions with someone on Reddit about this. It's interesting what they did with the soil from the pit. Does anyone actually know what happened to there? They discarded the bulk
Yes.
of it alongside of the road. Why would they do that?
Yeah, that's bizarre.
To me, it's just, if you're going to dig it up, you're going to test it. You're going to do something with it, and they just discarded it completely away from the
Correct.
pit area.
Correct. I really think it was all smoke and mirrors, because they gave the impression that they were sifting dirt, but you don't know what they were sifting from. And remember, they dug up those burn piles, the debris piles at the Manitowoc County gravel pit, and they put them in buckets. So they would have sifted through those contents. You don't know where those cremains came from. That's the frustrating thing. And one thing that you don't do, guys, is you don't mix the bones. You don't mix the bones from separate locations. You keep them separate. Now, it's quite clear that Dr. Bennett and Dr. Eisenberg received all these cremains in a box, right? You don't know the origin of those cremains, where they came from.
They could have came from anywhere.
Correct. They could have come from anywhere. And we've discussed this many times, guys. The bones resembled someone being placed in a crematorium, right? Because the bones were, a lot of them were calcined. Calcined bones means that all the organic material from the bone has dried up. That means you can't extract any DNA from those bones. They've been subjected to a massive amount of heat. And Dahan, I believe it was Dahan, showed that there's no way in an open fire pit you can generate that amount of heat. You need a huge amount of fuel, and there was no evidence of a lot of debris. So the whole burn pit, as being the primary burn site, It's been debunked. It's garbage. Bibi, do you have a comment?
It wasn't even a burn pit. It was a burn area.
Correct.
There was no pit. There was no indent. It was just
Correct.
a burn area.
Correct. And we already know that Scott Tadich lied or embellished the 10-foot high flames, because that would have been impossible, would have burnt down the garage, burnt down the dog where the dog lives, and probably blown up the propane tank as well. It was a relatively flat, small area, and the investigators knew that, and they were very concerned. So if you bring in a bobcat, you make the area bigger. You give the impression that it was much bigger than it actually was.
And you put the dent in it, which gives you that little bit to help you burn a body, you know.
Correct. But there were many problems with that burn site. Jack 61.
Well, I was just going to quickly say that by doing what they did with the Bobcat, it allowed Kratz and that whole mechanism to like rename, like BB said, a burn area into a burn pit because they dug it out.
Correct. And it's funny because, as you were saying, Jack 61, when they were interviewing or interrogating Brendan Dassey, they said, Brendan, this thing is 4 foot by 5 foot. It's the size of a tabletop, right? And Brendan Dassey clearly stated that both him and his uncle picked up Teresa's body and put it in the fire. They never talked about dismemberment, cutting up, nothing. So straight away, the investigators should have known that what Brendan was saying was just complete rubbish. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Well, I wanted to go back a little bit to Eisenberg. So we didn't have a coroner on the site. We didn't have the anthropologist. Eisenberg never set foot, as you said, on the property. Yet she puts this beautiful model of the skeleton, and she blues out where the pelvis is, like the pelvic bones and stuff. And we know, I go back over and over again on this, the cremains were tiny, the size of a nail bed, right?
Correct.
Yet when the jury sees all of that, they think that they found a whole pelvis.
Well, put it this way, and here's the deception, right? You're correct. If you see a whole pelvis, remember, part of a human pelvic bone was allegedly found in Stephen Avery's burn pit. So the impression is, wait a minute, if the pelvic bone was found in Stephen Avery's burn pit, surely that's got to be a pelvis of either an animal or somebody else, right? And you're correct. The impression is, they found the whole pelvic bone, but they didn't. The sizes of the bones were tiny, right? A few inches at most. So because Dr. Eisenberg said we have one victim here, guys, one victim, it meant that potentially meant that part of a pelvic bone that belonged to an adult female was present in Stephen Avery's burn pit, but there's no evidence of that. We don't even have an in situ photograph. But the other part of the pelvis was found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Pardon me. How do you explain that? Anyone got an explanation? Yeah, me neither. I've got no explanation. But it goes to show that either the body was cut up into small fragments or the bones were distributed in different locations. All right, guys, do we have any other further comments? Sammy, any more questions?
Well, I think everything was covered. We did have Rhonda Newman say that she said, my brother hunts, his sons and him use deer urine scent.
Okay.
So I guess that masks the hunters' human smell, and they hunt by direction of the wind. That all makes sense. It's very logical. So as far as the showering before, we don't know, all of the details as far as stuff like that.
Correct.
But otherwise, it would not be a common thing for a hunter to just do like a normal shower like we would with soap and water. Absolutely not. Not if they
Correct.
really plan to catch anything.
No,
Okay, but
correct.
that's it.
And also, Bobby Dassey didn't spend much time hunting because remember, he had to go to work that evening. So, and also the same thing with Scott Tadich. He didn't spend much time hunting as well because remember, he picked up Barb to go and see his mum. So it seems rather strange timing wise. Neville, do you have a comment?
Yes, back to the cremains. To burn, let's say, a chicken or something, a goose, a deer, and a human body to the level
Yes,
of the cremains, the size of them, you know what I mean? That they
yes,
really look like they came like from a crematorium. And we all know that
correct.
60% is already missing.
Yes.
I don't know. It's just, it doesn't flow. It doesn't make sense. I mean, how long would it take to, I mean, did they chop her up when she was, I don't know, like in one piece, or did they burn her and then chop her up? I don't know. It just
Well,
does not
the thing,
seem logical that she would be reduced to 2 kilos. What did you say? Or 2 pounds or 5 pounds?
yeah, well, there was a
Mm.
lot. There was a lot, I think about 2/5. They found
Mm-hmm.
2/5 of the skeletal remains. No one knows where the rest is. It could still well be buried. We don't know. If you go with the theory that she was murdered, cut up, dismembered, and she could have been placed in a shallow grave, and parts of her could have been sequentially burnt, and they were dumping the burnings in the gravel pit. We don't know. We simply do
Yeah.
not know. But don't forget, human cut bones were found in Yonder burn barrel number 2. What are they
Yeah.
doing in there? I mean, this has now become farcical. Could you imagine Stephen Avery deciding to pick up a couple of bones, walking a couple of 100 yards, and depositing those bones in his sister's burn barrel? Why not take the whole lot? Why would you want to burn Teresa Hallbach right outside your back door? It makes no sense whatsoever.
Whatsoever.
No, it's crazy. Guys, do we have any other further comments? All right, we're all good? Beautiful. All right, guys, what we'll do, we'll continue. We'll do episode number 5. Now, this one is really interesting. So, guys, let's have a look at slide number 13. Now, remember, when Stephen Avery went to trial, an important element of his defense was that Stephen Avery believed that his blood was taken from the 1996 blood vial and it was planted in the Toyota RAV4. And what Kathleen Zellner did, remember, she's now representing Stephen Avery. She says, I quote, I inherited this defense theory, and that is that the blood that was present in the Toyota RAV4 came from the 1996 blood vial. What Kathleen Zellner wanted to do is to determine the feasibility of using that blood vial for planting the blood. So if we have a look at slide number 14, well, of course, what had happened was the FBI tested the swabs. Now, what is remarkable here is that the Wisconsin State Crime Lab gave Dr. LeBeau, who's from the FBI, they gave the swabs to him. The FBI did not go and subpoena the RAV4 and do all the swabs de novo. They basically accepted the swabs given to them from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. So, if you want to be mischievous and nefarious, all you need to do is to hand Dr. LeBeau swabs that came from somewhere else. So, if they were swabs from Stephen Avery's bathroom, from his garage, or from his Grand Am. There's no way that Dr. LeBeau is going to know where those swabs came from. He assumes those swabs came from the Toyota RAV4. So if you want to swap a swab, Mark LeBeau is not going to know where they came from. He assumes they came from the Toyota RAV4. So Dr. LeBeau tested the swabs. Now, I believe he was given 6 swabs altogether. And I quote, Dr. LeBeau says, "It's my opinion that the blood stains that were collected from the RAV4 could not have come from the EDTA tube that was provided to us in this case." So you know that a purple top blood tube contains the anticoagulant EDTA, keeps the blood in a liquid form. Now, lo and behold, the defense team found the vial, and it appeared that the actual container where the vial was being kept in, the evidence tape was ripped. So it got the defense team fairly excited. However, the FBI had to develop a brand new test for EDTA because they never had one. No one really tests for EDTA. And the last time they tested for EDTA was in the O.J. Simpson trial. That turned out to be a disaster. So one needs to take those results with a pinch of salt, right? Because there were limitations with the EDTA results. Now, Stephen Avery had recut open his right middle finger. And so fresh blood, the state is saying, oh, no, that blood in the RAV4 came from Stephen Avery's finger. And of course, fresh blood is not going to have any EDTA in it, right? So that really hurt the defense because when Dr. LeBeau tested the samples, the swabs, he found no EDTA. But it doesn't mean that EDTA wasn't present. It meant that with his detection system, they couldn't detect it. So it could have been there, but his machine did not detect any EDTA, right? But there are limitations, of course. Now, look, the important thing here is that Kathleen Zellner consulted with her experts. And they said to Kathleen, look, there's really no point in EDTA retesting or actually checking the age of the blood because the blood now is quite old. Remember, when they tested the blood vial and the swabs, the blood was already from 1996. So the blood was quite old. So in essence, what Kathleen Zellner did was abandon the blood planting theory from the vial, right? So she asked the question, okay, if it didn't come from the vial, could it have come from any other place? So let's have a look at slide number 15. Well, lo and behold, what Stephen Avery said, and you can see here in the picture, he had a nasty gash on his right middle finger, but you can see it's healed, right? His finger had been healed. And what he stated was on November the 3rd, he cut open his finger again when he was trying to unlatch, I think, his sister's trailer. And as a consequence of that, he bled profusely. And you can see that in his Grand Am, because he went to his Grand Am to retrieve a phone charger, and there's blood everywhere in the Grand Am. He also bled on the sink and also on the bathroom floor. So he recut open his finger. Now, guys, if you've been paying attention, Brendan Dassey gave 7 different versions of how his uncle had cut his finger. So clearly, Brendan Dassey had no idea how Stephen Avery had cut open his finger. But he definitely did on November the 3rd, right? And he bled. Let's have a look at slide number 16. So Stephen Avery, he was questioned by Emily in December 2005. And Emily asked him a simple question. Okay, there's blood in the Toyota RAV4. where did this blood come from? So Stephen Avery said, look, I bled in my sink at home in the bathroom, right? And so the story he said was someone took the blood from the sink, his sink, and then used that blood to plant it in the Toyota RAV4. So he definitely cut himself. We know that. We can see the injury on his finger. And we also know there is his blood in his own Grand Am. So he definitely profusely bled. And he stated that he definitely bled within his bathroom sink and also on the floor. If we have a look at slide 17, both him and his brother Chucky, they went to Menards to buy, I think, some power tools or something like that because they were going to Crivets. But what they noticed was just about when Stephen and Chuck were going to turn on Highway 147 or Road 147, they noticed tail lights near Stephen Avery's trailer. So what they did is they drove around, went all the way back. However, they didn't find a vehicle. Now, Stephen Avery said that he never went back inside to see whether somebody was inside. But very interestingly, he said that when he actually did go in his trailer, when they came back, he smelled cigarette smoke, right? And Stephen Avery doesn't smoke. So that was very, very interesting and curious. And if we have a look at slide number 18, guys, we know that he's telling the truth because he was captured and his brother on CCTV going to Menards. And we know the time that he actually was there. So we have something very interesting. He bled in his sink on November the 3rd. He goes with his brother, Chucky, to Menards, and he notices before he gets onto Highway 147 that there are tail lights near his trailer. Now, guys, you can clearly see a vehicle could have easily come from across the cornfield, right? Remember the Loof dog tracks went across from Cuss Road to Stephen Avery's trailer. So a vehicle could have easily have come from Cuss Road across the cornfield. It could have come from that way. No one would have seen it. But the boys saw it, came back, there was no vehicle. But here's the important thing. When Stephen Avery got up in the morning on November the 4th, he had noticed that the blood in his sink was gone, right? And we have to take it on face value, guys, that Stephen Avery is telling the truth. He bled in his sink and he never cleaned it up. When he woke up in the morning on November the 4th, he had noticed that someone had cleaned up the blood. All right, so guys, let's have a look at slide number 19. Well, what Kathleen Zellner did, now remember, she's always testing forensic evidence. That's the way she operates. She's trying to deconstruct the state's case. So what she did, she went with her helper, an assistant, and they went to Stephen Avery's trailer and they took the sink, the original sink from his bathroom, right? And what they're going to do is do forensic testing on the sink itself. So if we have a look at slide number 20, this is very, very interesting. Now remember, she's got a blood splatter expert who knows how blood behaves. So you're not going to get anyone better than Stuart James. But something very curious was stated by Cherie Culhane in the Stephen Avery trial, and I quote, and she was questioned about this. Question, and can you show the jurors the A7, what A7 is and where you obtained it? Answer, A7 was some reddish brown crust that I found here on the floor beside the console. Cherie Culhane's talking about the Toyota RAV4. Question, and did you perform any presumptive test on each of those samples? Answer, yes, I did. Note, when Cherie Cohen tested the crust, they were phenolphthalein positive, which means it indicates that they were crusts of dried blood. Now, I don't know about you, but has anyone ever bled any crusts? Bibi, can I just ask you, you did an experiment once with some blood. Is that true?
Yeah, I pricked my own finger and bled on a plate, a porcelain plate similar to the sink.
Yes.
Yeah, and it crusted very much the way it is in the picture with a darker ring around the outside. And as soon as
Yes.
it does get dry, it breaks up very easily, even on its own,
Yes.
into a powder or
Yes.
flakes, yes, or shards.
Yes.
And it's very easy to rehydrate it also.
Yes.
It just takes a little drop of water
and to
smush it
rehydrate the
around
blood.
and and
Yes.
it rehydrates beautifully.
Right. But Bibi, you never bled any flakes, did you?
No. The only place I got flakes was on
After it
the
dried.
yeah, after it dried. Yes, they were more shards, but I would say shards. But yeah, flakes. People, I could see it described as flakes.
Yes. Now we're still on slide 20 at this stage. Thank you, Bibi. So what the experts did is they just took blood from a dropper and they dropped it on carpet. This is the type of carpet that you would find within a car. And what they discovered was, the blood got absorbed into the carpet as one would expect. Unless, of course, Teresa Horbach somehow had some type of use some type of spray to prevent absorption into the carpet, but none of that was mentioned. So what the experts did is they tried small drops, large drops. The blood was absorbed into the carpet. No crusts were formed at all. So it's very unusual that a crust will be present on the floor. So guys, if we have a look at slide number 21. So what they did is they took blood from a purple top tube and they simply placed it within the sink and they observed what the blood actually does. What they found was exactly what Bibi found. The blood in time, I think it took 90 minutes, the blood in time dried out and could form a crust. And you can see in the middle picture on the bottom, crusts were able to be lifted from the sink and collected in an envelope. But what was interesting was this. A lot of the blood had remained in liquid form that was in the sink because the sink is non-porous. So the expert was able to simply take a swab and collect up the blood. And as Bibi said to you, you can collect up dried blood, you can add liquid to it, and you rehydrate the blood. So
there
you've got
there was one other thing that I would like to note.
Yes.
One of the drips onto the plate did create that donut style looking drop that you see on Steve's floor. So
Correct.
that doesn't necessarily mean anybody stuck a Q-tip in that or it sucked the middle up. Because one of my
Correct.
drops of blood it was a full drop, a dome drop of blood, and it dried like a donut like that.
Yes, correct. And so basically, if you have a drop of blood and it splashes, you create that donut shape. So yeah, for sure. Thank you, Bibi. But the important thing here, guys, is that the blood in the sink was able to be mopped up using a Q-tip, and you can also use a dropper and pick up the blood again in the dropper. So it actually takes around about 90 minutes or so for the blood to completely dry out and form a crust. So that's very, very interesting. Okay, so guys, if we have a look at slide number 22, and as you can see here, what the expert did was he got the blood using a dropper from the sink, and he was able to dribble blood onto a surface. and the blood still was in liquid form, and by gravity you can see the direction that the blood went down. And that's very interesting, because that shape that you see here is exactly what you find on the Toyota RAV4, right? So it basically means taking a dropper of liquid blood and dropping it onto a surface, and the blood runs down by gravity. Okay, so guys, if we have a look at slide 23, this is incredible. So basically, the blood spatter expert was able to reproduce all the blood droplets and flakes in the Toyota RAV4. Very, very easy to do. And as you can see here, you can drop blood flakes, you can use a Q-tip, and you can run it on the surface of a CD case or the seat, and through a Q-tip, you can reproduce the blood droplets or the blood smear which is present near the ignition. But have a look at the blood on the right-hand side on the metal frame. All it needed was one drop of blood to be placed on the metal frame, and through gravity, the blood flows down to create exactly what you see in the official crime scene photos. So guys, Kathleen Zellner's blood spatter expert was able to reproduce exactly what was present in the Toyota RAV4. And it took him only a couple of minutes to do it. So that was very, very important. So if we have a look at slide number 24, you know that what Kathleen Zellner is doing is to undermine the confidence in the verdict, right? And so she's looking at things about ineffective assistance to counsel. In other words, the defense team did not perform up to a certain standard for Stephen Avery. One of the things that the defense team didn't have is a blood spatter expert. And it's very, very frustrating, because had Stuart James been on board, he could have well disassembled what was present in the Toyota RAV4. And that's very important. Also, and this is unfortunate too, the defense could not present a viable Denny suspect, right? Because of some type of gentleman's agreement, and the judge stepped in, and Ken Kratz prevented any reference to any type of Denny suspect, which was very, very frustrating. But Kathleen Zellner asked a very important question. She said, okay, who could have committed the crime? And she was able to rule out Josh Radandt as a Denny suspect. She believed in his alibi, and she checked the alibi, and it all checked out, right? So by a process of elimination, she was able to take out Josh Radandt as a Denny suspect. So what she did, if we have a look at slide 25, guys, we're nearly done. Now, this is the what, why, and who. Now, this is really embarrassing when you think about it. What Kathleen Zellner did is she approached a former FBI agent by the name of Greg McGarry, and she basically asked him, all right, how do you do a proper investigation of a murder? A murder has taken place. What do you do? So what Greg said was to Kathleen Zellner, and you can see Kathleen Zellner's eyes rolling in the back of her head, because she knew what had to be done. But the FBI expert said, well, if you ask what happened and also why did it happen, you get to who did it. And the thing that he was very strong about was to do a thorough victimology analysis. Now, I'll ask my panel, guys, did the state do a victimology analysis on Teresa Halbach? Yes or no?
No.
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 Right.
In fact, they
No.
did the opposite, because they hid
They
all
did
of her
exactly.
Yes.
They whitewashed it.
Yes.
Yes. And guys, this is a former FBI agent, right? And he says, look, you got to do a victimology analysis. You got to find out what did Teresa Halbach do that potentially put her at great risk. None of that was done. And in actual fact, Ken Kratz, in his book, yes, I've read his book, he even said that he wanted to punch Jerome Buting in the nose in the courtroom for even suggesting that Teresa Halbach's private lifestyle had anything to do with anything, right? So Ken Kratz, they worked very hard to keep everything hush-hush and quiet. But clearly the FBI agent says you've got to do a victimology analysis. And he said, you've got to look at everyone that Teresa had been in touch with. And he made the following remark, which is remarkable when you think about it, because it's obvious. And it is 70 to 80% of people who are murdered by someone they know, right? Very rare that it's just going to be a random murder, a random killing, when you consider how brutal the actual murder was. But he did say, you got to look at all sexual relationships, including boyfriends. And the thing that Greg made very obvious is the following. He said ex-boyfriends should be in the suspect pool. Now, guys, I asked my panel, were any of Teresa Halbach's ex-boyfriends, hint, hint, Ryan Hilligus, were they ever put in the suspect pool? Panel, tell us.
No. They made him an honorary police person.
Yeah.
Should have been on the payroll.
Well, maybe he was.
He might have been.
Correct. Okay, guys, let me continue. So if we have a look at slide 26, clearly Kathleen Zellner has got a lot of interest in Ryan Hilligus. And I quote, this was what happened in court. Question. This is Ryan Hilligus who's being questioned. And Ryan Hilligus was Teresa's ex-boyfriend. And remember that Teresa Halbach was living with Scott Blowdorn. Ryan Hilligus is good friends with Scott Blowdorn. So Ryan Hilligus was questioned, and I quote, and during this entire missing person period, that is before the RAV4 was found, did the police ever ask you for any kind of alibi for October 31st? No. They never asked your whereabouts whatsoever? I don't believe so. So it would be fair to say that you weren't in any way treated like a suspect, that you could tell? That's correct. So the FBI agent is telling Kathleen Zellner, hey, you got to put ex-boyfriends at the top of your list. And clearly the state did not even consider Ryan Hilligus, Scott Blowdorn, or anybody else as a potential suspect. So guys, if we turn to slide 27, it's clear that Zellner has placed Ryan Hilligus at the top of her Denny suspect. I want to ask my panel, do you think this is correct for Kathleen Zellner to say this?
Yes.
Anybody else? Who puts Ryan Hilligus on a Denny suspect list?
Well, he should be.
Absolutely.
There are
He's gotta be-
several
Top of
people
the
that
list.
should be.
Yeah, he's got to be investigated and cleared or included, one of the two, and that wasn't done.
I also call BS that he was never asked. And where were you on Monday, the 31st of October?
And
Well,
It's just not possible.
let's not forget before we move too far past this, that Kratz recently, and I'm talking about in the last several months, put up an alibi for
correct.
Ron Hilligus and said, "Hey, why would he do that?"
Yes, correct. Completely bizarre. Neverly, do you have a comment?
No, sorry.
Okay, so clearly Ryan Hilligus was an ex-boyfriend of Teresa Halbach, right? But if you notice that Ryan Hilligus led the search team, he was one of the leaders of the search parties that went out. And of course, he's the one that interacted with Pam of God. And Pam of God was given a map, the direct phone number to Sheriff Pagel, and also a camera, right? And she went directly with her daughter Nicole to the Avery salvage yard and found the Toyota RAV4. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, can I just say how very wrong this is? This whole picture. Is he not considered an ex in the scheme of things?
Well, correct. And don't forget, he actually moved in to Teresa Halbach's house, and he had access to everything in that home for several days. Because remember, she wasn't reported missing for several days. So when Wiegert says in court, oh, well, Brendan and Stephen had 5 days to clean up. Well, same with Scott Blowdorn and Ryan Hilligus. They had days to do all sorts of things to cover their tracks. Guys, do we agree? There we go.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. So someone like the FBI agent would have been horrified the way this case was processed and looked at. Now, what is interesting here, guys, if we have a look at slide 28, and Teresa in an email says, and I quote, although Ryan stopped by last night because he and Scott were going out and he was checking me out, in brackets, I know when he's checking me out, but I didn't mention it to him. Anyway, it gets me thinking, how was it that this guy held my interest for so long and I allowed myself to love him so much and nothing else has come up since then? And in the CASO reports, I quote, upon our arrival at the residence, Ryan Hilligus met us. Ryan stated he was a close friend of Teresa Halbach and he was temporarily staying at Teresa's residence, right? And I quote, I then observed Ryan go to the computer desk into a drawer, and Ryan advised the investigators that Teresa had been to some type of place, OBGYN, I think it could be obstetrics and gynecology.
Yes,
So
that is. Yeah.
it's pretty obvious that Ryan knew what Teresa Halbach was doing and where she had gone. And that's pretty remarkable considering that he's meant to be an ex-boyfriend. And I believe it's true that Teresa Halbach refused to photograph a wedding knowing that Ryan Hilligus was going to be there. And that's remarkable because a wedding normally is good money for a photographer. So that's rather remarkable. All right, guys, let's have a look at slide 29. We're nearly done. Okay. Now, Ryan Hilligus was questioned during the pre-trial, and I quote, and did the officers who let you in, now remember, this is Ryan Hilligus and Scott Blowdorn that went in the Avery salvage yard, right? Because you can see that he clocked in with Scott Blowdorn. So he was there at the Avery salvage yard. And I quote, and did the officers who let you in know that you had a relationship as a former boyfriend with the missing woman at that point? Answer, I don't know if anybody knew I was an ex-boyfriend of hers. I guess I never saw the relevance in it. Well, of course not. But quite clearly, if he's a suspect, do you want him A, at his ex-girlfriend's home, B, accessing her private messages and voicemails, and C, do you want him on the Avery salvage yard where there's forensic evidence present? Everything is completely upside down here in this case, guys.
D, none of the above.
None of the above, correct. It's the most bizarre thing you could ever encounter. Yet, I remember when Fassbender was questioned about this, he said, oh, of course, you look at boyfriends, you look at this, you look at lovers, etc., etc. But the reason why they didn't do it is because they found the Toyota RAV4 on Stephen Avery's property, or the Avery salvage yard. So therefore, if you're a planter, that's exactly what you would do to draw the attention away from other suspects and have a tunnel vision approach to one person only, Stephen Avery. But really, this whole investigation is all wrong, Jack 61.
As everyone knows, I've been reading through, along with others, through the pretrial stuff, and reading through all of these Sturm interaction and her and Nicole, and how that all went down, and then tied it in with this other. It is so bizarre to go back and reread this now. It just blows me away.
Correct. And that's why, Jack, those readings that you're doing are so important, because you get a much better perspective now that we're doing these MAM podcasts. You can put it all together and you can see the shenanigans. Bibi.
Well, and even if Ryan and Scott were not her exes in any way, shape, or form, why would they have friends of the victim on Avery salvage yard? Why would they name one reason on God's green earth why they would bring them on there?
Correct. The whole thing is bizarre. And so, if Ryan Hillegas had anything to do with what happened to Teresa Horbach, what he did was perfect, because he remained close to law enforcement. So he knew what they were doing. So he kept close. He kept at arm's length. So he knew what was going on. So the spotlight of suspicion was never on him or Scott. It was only on Stephen Avery. All right, guys, let's finish this. So if we have a look at slide 30, oh boy, this is just totally bizarre. And this is looking at the Toyota RAV4. And as we know, you can see that the blinker light on the right-hand side has been punctured out. It's been damaged. And I quote, damaged the parking light area of her car and actually made an insurance claim. Hillegas advised that Horbach took a cash payout for the damage and had not repaired it. And what's bizarre, guys, is that he now inserts himself with damage to the Toyota RAV4. And when Stephen Schmitz saw the Toyota RAV4 come onto his property, he stated the vehicle looked very new. I don't believe anyone had noticed that the light had been damaged. Now, if you're a professional photographer going around areas photographing other vehicles to put in a trade magazine, you want to make sure that your car had a functioning blinker lights, because otherwise the police will pull you over, right? Crazy. All right, so what Kathleen Zellner did, if we look at slide 31, they checked with the insurance company. And lo and behold, when the insurance company checked, they found no such claims had been presented for the damage to the blinker light. And you can see at the back of the Toyota RAV4 in the cargo area, there is the blinker light. And Kathleen Zellner made a very important statement. She said that blinker light has got to do with the events of the murder. They're tied to what happened to Teresa Horbach. And lo and behold, who puts himself and who ties himself with the blinker light? Ryan Hillegas. So if we look at slide 32, we're nearly done, guys. Kathleen Zellner postulated that the Toyota RAV4 ran into that Pinto when it was coming down Conveyor Road, and it caused damage to the Toyota RAV4, causing the blinker light to pop out, fall out. So someone who was driving the RAV4 picked up the blinker light and put it inside the back of the RAV. And if you have a look at our final slide, slide 33, there's something very suspicious going on, because the light at the back of the RAV4, you can see a brown mark or staining on the light, which happens to be very similar to the color of the Pinto that was blocking Conveyor Road. But if you look at the recently released photograph of the blinker light, CASO 2019, the brown stain has gone. Well, I don't know what's happened to it, but the brown stain, you can see it above, it's disappeared. All right, guys, that's the presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it, guys. We've gone through episode 4 and 5 to make up for the week that we've lost. Guys, let's open it up to the panel. Columbo.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Any comments? Bibi.
Where to start? Oh my God. I don't even know where to start at. It's all ridiculous. It's just all so ridiculous.
It is.
Well,
Very much so.
Greenlight is asking, is there any proof from all the bones that this was even Teresa?
No.
Well, we've we have discussed this a lot, and forensically and legally, you can't say that's Teresa Hallbach at all, because you needed back then in 2005 15 out of 15 loci to come up, and they only got 7, so they only got a partial profile.
And now
today,
how much is it they
20,
want? Yeah.
you need
20 now.
You need 20 loci. That's why Kathleen Zellner wanted to use the Andy rapid DNA testing system to retest the bones to get a profile. Now, the guy that invented the Andy rapid DNA system used it to ID victims. I think it was the Californian bushfires.
Yeah.
Where the bones were cremated to the same degree. He got a full profile. So legally, you can't say those bones were from Teresa Hallbach, but it highly is suggestive.
So now testing has advanced so much so that if those bones were on the table still for testing, it could be done.
No question.
Absolutely.
In actual fact, the guy that designed the Andy system, he even said it. He goes, there'll be no problems with the rapid DNA system because it's a very sensitive new technique. He goes, I'll be able to get a full profile.
That's cool.
Well, and ironically, I looked up that rapid DNA, and the FBI started using it in like 2010. And then ironically, what, in 2011, they give the bones back all of a sudden?
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. And conveniently, the bones disappear.
As soon as
So
it starts
now,
coming into play, the bones are given away.
Ruth
Oh, that
Robinson.
rhymed.
Ruth
It's
Robinson
all
has
smoke and mirrors.
Ruth Robinson has said, was Barb's trailer ever tested for Stephen's blood to prove he was telling the truth about his finger? Now, what would
No.
Barb's trailer have to do with that? I'm
They
just
were out
curious.
in the yard hooking up a
Yes,
little
correct.
snowmobile
Okay.
trailer behind the truck,
Yes.
or unhooking it or whatever.
Correct.
I very
When he
seriously doubt
broke
they
open,
did that.
Yeah,
I'm not
correct.
even sure if he walked inside her trailer or not.
Yeah, that I don't know. But in a statement that he made to Kathleen Zellner, he stated that Bobby Dassey knew that he was bleeding, which is very, very interesting. And we know that he cut open his finger because his blood was found in his trailer, on the floor, in the bathroom, in the laundry, and also in his Grand Am. So he stated that he went to his Grand Am to get his phone charger, and there was blood all over the gear shift lever everywhere. I believe they
And I'm
also
pretty sure that Kathleen Zellner even says later, after she's taken the zinc, right, that they
yes,
did find blood or presumptive there was
I
blood still,
believe that's the
yeah,
case. I
on
believe
the
that's the
sink.
case. Yes.
So,
So he was telling the truth.
Catherine is asking, she said, I'm not from the USA, so forgive my ignorance, but the one thing I have never understood from everything I've read and see is why he wasn't allowed to put forward any suspects.
Or
Yeah,
that
the Denny. He could have, and he met the first two criteria for all 8 of his Denny suspects, which is like means and opportunity, but motive, he didn't come up with a motive, and this is where I say that Buting really dropped the ball, is because
correct.
they had a private detective on the payroll. Why didn't they have him go out and talk to people and try and figure out the motive, like that Ryan was her ex, that she's sleeping with Scott, all
So,
these things to give the motives. That's what they didn't meet on the motives.
but
They
I
didn't
would
Correct.
like
provide
to
the
add
motive.
then, how on earth did Stephen Avery even meet those requirements himself as the
Well, he
prime
says he
suspect?
didn't.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
didn't.
Well, the
Yeah.
state does not have to prove the motive for Stephen. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah,
The
well,
state does not have to prove the motive.
so
Only
Mark
come up with a motive.
Seeley, he says, do we know the nature of the gentleman's agreement? Was it to deny discussion of TH personal life, or did it extend to denying consideration of alternative suspects?
Well,
I know they didn't want
That's the
her
Denny.
journal in there. They didn't want her journal out there.
Right.
So that was part of it.
And they didn't want you to know that they had taken her vibrator, because we had a clip of him
correct.
saying that himself.
Yes. Yeah. He was.
And
Ken Kratz was very upset about that.
and he was very hateful that Zellner is not honoring this gentleman's agreement that him and Buting had made.
Correct.
Too bad.
Correct.
So sad.
Correct.
All right, one more comment, and then I will leave you
Yes.
guys alone. One strand in the rab has said, back to the FBI testing of the blood. Was the test tube sample of Stephen Avery tested? If so, was there EDTA in it, or was it degraded?
Well, yes, they did find EDTA. What they did is that they used the blood vial and they dipped. They had to reproduce the same condition, so they put the blood on the a Q-tip, and then they looked for the presence of EDTA. Now, what had happened was some samples came up negative, so the test itself had issues. And part of the problem is this: the blood was very old. So some samples came up positive for EDTA, other samples came up negative for EDTA from the blood vial. And so there were problems with their setup. And one of the issues is this: the blood is very old. No one knows what's going to happen to the EDTA in blood that's really that old. However, Kathleen Zellner's own expert said, don't pursue it, you're wasting your time. Because the defense or the state could argue it either way, right? So if EDTA was present, the state would have argued, oh, it came from a cleaning product, or it came from this, or it came from that. So they would have argued it either way. So even the judge realized that, hey, look, it wasn't that much powerful of evidence. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the EDTA testing. Jack 61.
You could probably speak far better than probably anyone here, but isn't the problem with EDTA testing and the detection mechanism itself? In other words, it's inconsistent because the apparatus just doesn't work like it should.
Well, if you look, and I did a presentation on this, the actual setup that the FBI did look pretty good. I must admit, it looked pretty robust. But what is remarkable is that the speed in which the FBI came up with a test, it didn't take them too long at all to come up with a brand new test. One problem with the EDTA testing is this: it's got a detection limit. So it means that if EDTA is present, but in a very low concentration, it can't detect it. So the only thing that Lebeau could say was, in the samples that I tested, I couldn't detect EDTA. It doesn't mean that it wasn't there, right? So that's the problem. Plus, if the EDTA broke down and it actually was still there, you may not detect it. So the blood itself was quite old, Jack. And what's funny is the FBI in their report said, we can guarantee the stability of the EDTA in the blood, I think, for 2 years. So even they knew that the blood being tested was way too old.
So basically, they didn't have anything to compare what they found in
No,
2006
no,
to what an actual standard would be of that blood vial from that many years old.
no,
There you go.
no, they didn't. What they did is that they made up standards themselves. They obtained purple top tubes that had been, I think, in cold storage, but they weren't 9 years old or however old they were. They weren't that old, so they never had comparable blood to test.
And we know that blood vial was never, well, at least for some period of time, wasn't kept in proper storage.
No, and it's an actual
No.
miracle that the blood was still a liquid. But when you're talking about the planting of blood, if I was going to do it, that's what I would have used. Because if you're planting blood, you want to make sure that you have a name on a tube with the blood. So whoever was planting the blood knew 100% that it came from Stephen Avery. The blood in the sink is attractive, but whoever the planter was, they had to be 100% sure it actually came from Stephen Avery and not a third party, because there goes Stephen Avery will walk. If that blood was from another person, then Stephen Avery clearly can't be guilty. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, back to Lebeau. When he tested 3 stains and he said that all 6 of them didn't have EDTA, how
Correct.
ridiculous was that? It was just like so shady that a layman can see that something was up. Then as you said, the speed of the new test that they came up with, like within 2 weeks or something like that. And
it didn't take long.
It didn't take long. And that EDTA testing is unreliable, and that's why they made it obsolete, right? But then
they don't use them.
Yeah. And then Zellner got really upset with the defense. She felt like the defense dropped the ball, that they should have totally have gone after Lebeau and discredit his testimony.
Correct.
And raise the doubt that even though it's FBI, there's certain
Correct.
respect that comes that, hey, if FBI says that's how it is, that must be true, that they should have gone after it, because you can't test 3 stains and say that all 6 of them
correct.
Okay, like, how ridiculous is that?
Correct.
Right?
He should have got sanctioned for that.
Yeah.
Because he said 3 stains that he never tested, 3 swabs that he never tested. He said that, yes, of course they contain EDTA, no EDTA, and he never tested them.
He has ESP?
Dr. Lebeau he was given 6 swabs.
I said he has ESP.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
He can tell the future.
Yes, he gave a result when he never tested them, and that's a cardinal sin. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Oh, that was my comment. I had another one, but I lost it. It's okay.
Okay. Guys, any other comments and any other questions?
We're looking good in the chat.
I
Okay,
remembered. I
Neverly.
remembered, Dr. Silkman. Yeah. Regarding the test tube, you did a presentation on it, didn't you, when you said that
Correct.
some blood was missing from the tube, and that's more
Yes.
logical
Yes.
to have
Not
used that blood to plant it rather than the one from the sink, which is scary and
well.
spooky anyway.
Yes. Yes. Well, normally a purple top tube contains around about 10 mils of blood. When the FBI measured the volume, there was 5.5 mils. And I worked out that 6 droplets of blood is about half a mil. You're not going to notice half a mil missing. So clearly, someone took a lot of blood from that blood vial. And to me, if you're going to plant blood, that's the way I would do it, because then I know 100% for sure that the blood that I've planted will come back as Stephen Avery. You can't, whereas the blood in the sink is good, but you have to know, and you think about it, guys, whoever went into his trailer had to have known that Stephen Avery was bleeding. It also meant that the planter had access to the Toyota RAV4, and the planter knew that Teresa Hallbuck was dead, right? Whereas if you use the blood from the blood vial, then you can take as much time as you want because you know that it's Stephen Avery's blood. Neverly.
Yeah, and then the whole red day in the calendar that there was a hole in the
Yes,
purple rubber. We debunked that. That's normal. That's
correct.
how blood
That's
gets into the
normal.
tube. However,
Correct.
you could see a little like crusty blood at the top of the
Correct.
vial,
Yes.
which makes you think that somebody opened the vial, took the
The
blood
blood
out
vial,
of there.
yes,
Yeah,
the blood vial
yeah,
was
because
open.
usually it's under vacuum. So when this
Correct.
happens, yeah, okay.
Correct. The blood vial was definitely open.
Exactly.
It was definitely open. But we know that it was open because it was used for forensic testing, I believe, I think it was part of his exoneration, but they did take blood from that blood vial. We know that. But nearly close to 4.5 mils of blood is missing from that tube, which is very, very interesting. And so, we could talk about blood planting, where the blood came from. Look, there's many different ways you can do it. If I was going to do it, that I would use that tube because I know that it's from Stephen Avery. Whereas the blood from the sink, you don't know. But the blood from the Grand Dam, you know it's from Stephen only after you test it. So if you've got all these swabs that come from the Grand Dam, all you do is you give them to Labo, right? And if someone did a DNA profile from those swabs, it'll come up with Stephen, it's blood, presumptive positive, bang, but no EDTA. And that's how you fool the FBI. Okay, guys, I am conscious of the time. It's nearly my bedtime. Do we have any quick questions or final comments?
Thank you, Dr. Silkman.
Oh, no, thank you guys. Thank you guys for the excellent questions. And of course, I'll thank everyone on YouTube that's been following the podcast. I realize that for you guys in the United States, it's pretty early in the morning. But for us in Australia, it's nearly midnight. So we've gone back to the old times. So hopefully we'll get some more questions. And if you like what we do, guys, please hit the like button. If you like our channel, please subscribe. So, guys, do we have any quick final comments before we call it a night? For me, Jack.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. Great presentation. Thank you for doing the work. And
Oh,
Neverly
not
too.
at all.
I know she helps. So
Yes, and
thank you very much. I know this kind of stuff is not easy to do. It's a lot of work. So thank you.
No, pleasure. And Neverly has been helping me put the presentations together, and that's been awesome. It's definitely made my job a lot easier. But clearly, we can see what Kathleen Zellner was doing. She was doing logical investigation, and unlike what the state did, and she's solely focusing her attention on the forensics. She's taken the case apart piece by piece, and when you look at the evidence against Ryan Hilligus, it looks really, really bad for Ryan, and apparently he hasn't come forward to speak with Kathleen Zellner like Josh Radandt did. So he remains a person of interest. Okay, guys, any other further comments? Bibi.
Just like to tell everyone to enjoy their weekend.
Yes, yes, Neverly.
Please come join us to Discord, Foul Play Discord. It's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Bibi, another final comment?
Oh, no, sorry.
No worries. Well, look, guys, I know this was a fairly long podcast, but we were able to do 2 episodes of MAM. Hopefully next week we'll go back to our usual 1 episode analysis. And please be safe. There is a pandemic going on. So, respect what the governments are saying, keep your distance, and, hopefully if we all are vigilant, we can defeat this thing. We can defeat the virus for sure. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And if you like, come and join us in Discord for chat. Someone will always be there to answer your questions.
There's already people arriving there.
Oh, awesome.
Hi, new people. Yeah, we'll be there in a minute.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much.
This has been a Foul Play production. Stay safe, everybody.